There cannot be justice without punishment. There is no mercy without cruelty. Cast out, I fell, and the 9 hells rose to meet me. As you ascend to power, do not pity or show mercy to those you climb over to get there. The weak do not warrant your compassion. Compassion is the forever weakness. Assert dominance and power over others. Show strength of will in the image of your Lord, the Lord of the 9. The blasted plain of Nessus drifted in its crimson gyre, an ovoid wound in the void, jagged-edged with smoke rising throughout the final layer of the 9 hells. The plain spanned near 2,500 miles from east to west and near 1,100 from northmost to southmost. At the final loop of the serpent's coil rose the fortress Nessus, a paradox cleaved in black stone. Corridors clad in precious metals, gems, and rare fabrics, some gathered from raids on the abyss, others ceremonial from mortal worshippers. Yet beneath such splendor, a hush of despair could be heard just above the still silence. The hall seemed uninhabited for mile upon mile, though the sound of weeping seeped from the stone, as if the citadel remembered the fall that the Lord of Nessus had once experienced within the Pact Primeval. Upon an infernal throne at the crater's heart, Asmodeus sat as if the seat had been shaped for him aforetime. His ruby rod resembled a statue rendered into iron as it sat by his side, clauses without mercy written in law. Although the gods may exist in multiplicity, Asmodeus was the constant, the inimitable. The air that circled the chamber around him held the pressure of a sealed verdict, one that he had already decided. A portal opened as the infamous Archduke Balzabul stepped through in his devil-proud prime. Tall, winged, shimmering sable skin, devilish beauty with the composite eyes of a fly. He was known to overreach, the reckoning had shown this, but in the severe way of tyrants, his callous ambition and utter arrogance still knew their place. He bowed with the exact angle that preserved pride while offering respect. Yet an almost minuscule tremor feathered within his posture. His breath came quicker than he wished, pupils tightening a fraction too fast. Lord of the 9th, I attend, as you and the hour required. I understand the penance I perhaps must extend. Redemption may be a thin possibility. I respect the decision you must be required to state. Although it may be a shame to not use this moment to appreciate this as a reflection of your power and the echelon you hold over the rest of your domains. Permit me this honor. Asmodeus regarded him, and when he spoke, his words moved with the calm of a being who almost enjoyed this part of the proceeding. Balzabul, you know the high heavens well, and as you are aware, we in the hells represent the contrast to the simplistic understanding of good, a soothing fiction for the treason-minded, for it is a perceived and misinformed assessment from those above. I do not care for your attempts at the throne. This is part of the hierarchy and power struggle we embody. However, we have laws. There is no redemption, only betrayal of the camp you were born, or forged, to serve. You have seen to this. It was an honest attempt, and for that, I admire your ambition. He let the thought nest in the hush. The reckoning proved this. And thus, we return to first principles. Any devil permitted to raise against their superior. Clause 12, Article 6. If the beneficiary, 1. Balzabul, breaches any of the terms of this contract, including assault or intent to change the foundational basis of hierarchy without success, the beneficiary forfeits all rights to any benefits or services granted by the 9 hells. Any benefits or services rendered by hell's lords of the beneficiary may be removed, altered, or reversed as the beneficiary is reduced to any lower form the Lord of Nessus permits. I, alone, hold that power in its perfect form. As the contract states, demotion of any devil is permitted. A faint, defensive flare crossed Balzabul's gaze. I acknowledge the demotion, although I will state that within Article 7, The demotion itself should be in form first, until an adequate replacement. History will name this attempt Lord of Nessus. I now accept your punishment, he offered, strong, yet the hesitation in his statement was clear. Asmodeus glanced up and down upon the devil before him. From the shadow of a pillar, Alaster the Grim knelt, grey skin mapped by gouged scars, wings tattered like smoke that remembered the fire, armorless, wordless, vast. Of all Nessus's instruments, he was one that Asmodeus never questioned in terms of loyalty. Asmodeus finally began to deliver the sentence. Lord of Lies is an accurate assessment of your transgressions, although you are still useful for my designs. The ruby rod tapped the floor of the throne room once. Sigils brightened in the air. A procession of lies spoken to devils, from Beelzebul's first proud falsehood to the last conspiratorial whisper. They turned, slow and inexorable, around the Lord of the Seventh. A year for each lie, Asmodeus said. A body to mirror the tongue you were so eager to shape to your own lies. A shape to represent yourself as you are. Your grandeur trades for a humiliation, and the prince now becomes the worm. Beelzebul's nostrils thinned. His pride left his face, and a line of worry appeared at the edge of his mouth like a crinkle at the corner of a worn page. The change began akin to a decree formalized from a devilish jury. The proud geometry of a devil's frame softened, then sagged, then slid. Wings crumpled to a withered, slimy mass. Fingers, those who led the reckoning deft instruments of written pacts and signatures, melted into ridges along a lengthening torso. Skin glossed, then formulated into a grotesque, slug-like abomination. The throat dragged itself forward with a wet rasp. His voice now changed, and his body glistened with mucus and thanks to the decree. Fecal matter and other rancid filth manifested in piles nearby the now changed devil. His deformed arms rested at his front, prehensile tails in functionality. A slug that wrought to the measure of all his lies. Beelzebul tried to laugh. It escaped as a hiss dragged over his attempted speech, and behind it, Fear's thin knife gleamed in the hand of his lost pride. Your penalty continues each time you lie, a consequence you decide once your debt, for all the lies you had once told, is complete. Your art of commerce can continue. Strike bargains as you please, but do so with the articulation and clarity truth permits. A shudder rippled from the slug form, half in fury and half in fear for the horrific transformation that was occurring. Witness his contracts and write their failures in the primeval we keep. Beelzebul gathered himself, length, slime, swarm, and shame, and with a sound akin to a crown sliding into a sewer, he vanished toward the ruin that now matched him. The flies streamed after like a morbid comet tail. A glorious outcome. It is by attempting to reach the top at a single leap that so much misery is caused in the world. He will be aware of his failure. In time, he will plot. He will scheme. However, forever will the dukes rest their gaze upon his form, and their contemplation for future ambitions will waver. The fortress of Nessus resumed its old rhythm. Summon Zariel, Asmodeus stated with authority. Bid her attend upon the craft of Pacts and the harvest owed from the mortal coil. The quotas I traced aforetime will need to be expressed with the fallen Duchess. Alastor, the executioner of Nessus, turned and departed down a corridor that seemed to lengthen as he moved. Alone upon the throne, the Lord of the Nine rested his ruby rod across his knee and let the law of the 9 hells settle over the chamber like night. There is no redemption, he murmured, only treason or fidelity against the side you were born to serve. The blasted plain of Nessus floats in a swirling crimson void. Its roughly ovoid, jagged-edged landmass extends for approximately 2,500 miles from east to west, and about 1,100 miles from its northernmost to southernmost points. The absolute flatness of Nessus allows a viewer to see for miles in all directions. Devoid of trees, structures, and changes in elevation, its desolate landscape provides little or no cover. Beings moving across its surface can be seen for hours before they finally close to ranged weapon distance. A network of crisscrossing gouges, gorges, and canyons scars the dry and rocky plain. The largest of these crevasses are miles across and dozens of miles deep. The layers millions of inhabitants dwell within these canyons, either in caves carved out of the walls or on the crevasse floors. Although the surface of Nessus is finite, its twisting canyons and tunnels contain an effectively infinite amount of space. The canyons intersect confusingly across the surface of Nessus. In a few places, they weave around each other, sculpting towering mesas. To reach a specific destination, explorers must be able to tell one gorge from another. In keeping with the layer's utter hostility to travelers, the crevasses are completely unmarked. Maps of the surface have been cobbled together from sketches created by generations of suicidally brave cartographers. But even when accurate, these maps are difficult to match with conditions on the ground. Few bridges span the canyons, and those that do exist are either heavily guarded or trapped. Any seemingly unguarded bridge is likely to hurl travelers into the gorge below if the correct password is not uttered when they reach the midway point. Without exception, the gorges of Nessus are deeper than 200 feet. Flightless devils are expected to remain in their home crevasses. In cases of emergency, though, they can travel up and down the walls either by holding tight to treacherous handholds or by using the fraying rope ladders. Inhabitants with poor climbing skills tend to stick close to their caves or hovels, venturing forth only when their lives depend on it. Indeed, devils plunge to their deaths from the canyon walls on an infrequent but regular basis. Creation myths regarding devils disagree in many particulars, but most fail to mention one incident: Asmodeus' final fall from the upper realms. His route to the pit remains a part of the Nessian landscape, a spiraling canyon called the Serpent's Coil. Presumably, most of this corkscrewing tunnel was once underground, but over the eons it has collapsed in on itself, leaving a swirling incision on the surface. The canyon becomes deeper with each new curve until it reaches its endpoint, where it becomes incalculably deep. This spot is where Asmodeus sits to this day, scheming, commanding, and bleeding still. Every drop of his spilled blood becomes a greater devil, usually a pit fiend with a heightened life force. Infused with maniacal loyalty, these spawn of Asmodeus patrol the Serpent's Coil, hunting for intruders to eradicate. The river Styx drops down from Caenia in a thundering waterfall and collects here in a shallow, fast-draining pool called Forgotten Lake. The Styx's waters then cascade in sheets down the sides of the canyons underlying the lake: Hell's Lips, the Crevasse of Eternity, the Eel, Spectre Gorge, the Gorge of Slaughter, and the Serpent's Coil. Tributaries of the Styx cover the canyon floors directly below the lake and fill each gorge for approximately another 50 miles in either direction. The Styx's waters are then consumed by the dry earth of Nessus, only to reappear in the neighboring evil plain of Gehenna. The waterfall kicks up a thick, oily mist that billows up over the lake. Adventurers who come within a half mile of the lakeshore can thus inhale the water in microscopic droplets, or it can seep into their pores. In legend, Forgotten Lake is known as the place where beautiful memories go to die. Even the most despicable of the damned can recall a few transitory moments of sweetness or tranquility in their mortal lives. These thoughts, once shorn from their owners, are the hardest for the corrupt waters of the Styx to break down. The excess beautiful memories fall down into the Forgotten Lake and are finally broken apart here, under its churning waterfall. for a few transitory moments, visual representations of these splendid recollections appear suspended over the lake's surface. Thus, a traveller may see a sylvan glade, a stunning elf maiden in robes of flowing white, or a laughing innocent child running through a field of wildflowers. Then these images are brutally torn apart, apparently by grasping tentacles, devouring insects, or nets of suffocating chain, each link of which is covered in razor-sharp hooks. These images of horror are so disturbing that even a mortal who understands their true nature might suffer an intense emotional jolt. The stunningly vast citadel known as Mal'Sheem sits at the juncture of Hell's Lips and Reaper's Canyon. The main structure, built of stone and Batorian green steel, stretches in an X-shape for miles along the floors of both gorges. Additional chambers and garrisons have been created by digging deep into the canyon walls. If Mal'Sheem ever collapsed, millions of devils would die in the crush of rock, but since the citadel was designed by Asmodeus himself, fears of such an event seem foolish. Mal'Sheem houses Asmodeus's vast army, which swells in number every time he sheds a drop of blood. These forces are restricted for his personal use when the moment comes to storm the heavens. At the endpoint of the Serpent's Coil sits Fortress Nessus, Asmodeus's bleak citadel. Built up around the crater where he finally landed after the fall, the fortress is a place of paradoxical splendor and bleakness. Every surface is decorated with precious metals, rare fabrics, and gems of astonishing size. But a sense of regret and despair permeates its well-appointed hallways. Though Asmodeus can summon any devil from anywhere to serve him, his fortress seems uninhabited. Vast hallways appear to stretch for miles, and muffled noises echo emptily through the corridors. Despite its apparent lack of residents, however, the sound of weeping constantly seeps through the walls. Mortals who spend time in the fortress of Nessus are often seized by a powerful melancholy. Jutting from the side of Reaper's Canyon is a copper citadel called Tabjari that is accessible only from tunnels inside the earth. These tunnels are elaborately trapped because the fortress contains a treasure that Asmodeus must protect at all costs. No devils patrol the halls surrounding Tabjari because the treasure exerts a disturbing influence on evil outsiders. Tabjari's deepest vault houses Asmodeus's original copy of the Pact Primeval, struck between himself and the primal deities of law. Its divine energy suffuses the entire complex, radiating an overwhelming aura that is not only lawful, but at the same time ineffably good and unspeakably evil. The fact that these last two energies are present in equal measure defies all known metaphysical principles, but they are juxtaposed all the same. The residual energy of the lawful good deities slowly leaches the cruelty from nearby devilkind. Any devil spending more than several hours within 1,000 feet of the Pact Primeval must test their mind and wisdom, or suffer a grotesque transmogrification that leads to demotion. Lemures often dissipate into faint traces of evil energy and are more often than not destroyed forever. Thus, the only living guardians of the sacred pact are mortal cultists of Asmodeus who were plucked from their planes of origin to protect it. By decree of all the lawful deities, a copy of the Pact Primeval must remain forever on Bata. Two other copies exist, under similar guard, one in Mechanus and one on Celestia. Each of these documents is impervious to destruction, but if it were somehow removed from its rightful plane, the powers of law would be significantly undermined, and chaos would be strengthened. Creatures who arouse the particular ire of Asmodeus are sealed into red-hot coffins and left here, kept alive through endless years of torment by diabolical magic. The hundreds of chalices stand in rows amid the ruins of a forgotten city. Some are said to hold the spirits of great heroes who fell under Asmodeus's power centuries ago. This secretive city hides behind towering walls of black stone, broken only by a single, small gate. Within its gloomy halls a cabal of cambions and devils learned in arcane lore experiment with the breeding of monsters, the creation of infernal constructs, and the perfection of dark rituals. Damned souls brought to Neshmanar are consumed in the most terrible ways imaginable, sometimes as nothing more than feed for hellish monstrosities as yet unknown beyond the citadel walls. The pit fiend Neshem rules over the city and supervises the dark studies of its foul lords. In the year of the Iron Dwarf's vengeance, 1485 by the Dale reckoning, Zariel's will rolled down through the brass corridors of Avernus. The order was simple and absolute. Despite the dragon cult's ambitions, Tiamat would be kept from rising in Baldur's Gate. The city was a battlefield Zariel meant to use in later schemes. Mizora smiled when the command reached her. The Cambion smile was a thing with several facets. Pride at being trusted, and that particular pleasure she took in setting a hook where her heart was softest. She unfurled a map of the coast, long lacquered nails clicking against the vellum as she traced a red arc to a lonely bluff northeast of the city, Dusthawk Hill. The cult's ritual would spark there. That was where she would pluck the city from the dragon's jaws and claim a better prize. As Will Ravengard dreamed, he heard a whisper. The words in his mind demanded he go to Dusthawk Hill alone. He was 17, the only son of older Ravengard, newly styled Grand Duke, a name and title that felt like armor he hadn't yet grown into. He had his father's hard discipline and a soldier's calluses, unlike a courtier's laugh. He'd spent more nights in the yard trading strikes than in silk-hung halls trading favors. In older Ravengard's design, Will would earn his place among the Flaming Fist, take up the mantle of Duke, and become champion of the city. Yet the whispers in his ear sounded unlike his father's marching orders. Fate, forever twisting its chains, pushed the sun towards a new path, one that would lead into a devil's arms. Will came alone as requested to Duskhawk, as the whisper had demanded. Below him, in a ring of scorched earth, robed figures chanted before a lattice of black iron. 5 chains were welded to it, each chain fastened to a horned skull. The air rippled with heat and the reek of hot infernal iron. Somewhere, far off, and near at once, a vast presence pressed against the world. Will was a swordsman. In spite of that, he lacked the wizardry to combat such a perceived threat. The ritual formed a portal. Even with his years of training, he knew he was ill-equipped to deal with this level of arcane expertise. Late to the festival, little hero of Baldur's Gate. The voice was velvet drawn over a blade. Mizora stepped from the lee of a bent hawthorn as if she had been there all along. Her horns were polished to an elegant curve. Her eyes glowed the color of coals banked for morning. Her smile made promises the law may later regret. Crimson silk, clearly wealthy, clung to her form. Flames licked the heels of her high-shod boots, leaving the leather pristine. He drew his sword anyway. She laughed, delighted. Do you always greet your only salvation with steel? Charming. She made a small gesture, and the world grew sharper, the chant, the weave of power clearly expanding in front of Will. I can give you what you need, courage you already possess. Nevertheless, you require power, perhaps to save your city, dearest Will. She tipped her head, studying his face as if measuring where to lay the chisel. And in exchange, Will Ravengard, you will give me what I want. And what is the prize that a spawn of hell demands? Gold? Soldiers? Or, as the typical request spoke of in the tales, my soul. Spare the denouement, she chided, then softened. Think of it as an investment, a gift with certain terms. Baldur's Gate will live tonight because you dared to invest in this deed. Your father will have a city to rule because you bled, and you gave what you could. And you will have stories. the bards, have yet to learn how to sing. Hellfire stitched the far horizon. The ritual's heat pulsed faster. Will looked down at the cultists and saw 5 shadows where there should have been one. Each shadow had a different crown of horns and a different hunger. There was no time to fetch the flaming fist, no time to ride for help. There was only the iron frame, the cambion with a lawyer's smile. "What is the price?" he asked, although perhaps within his cool demeanor, he knew the price, the deed, and the loss he would have to endure to save his city. "Elegant boy," Mizora purred, and with a flick of her wrist, a scroll of fine leather etched in gold unrolled between them, held aloft by levitation magic. Infernal sigils crawled along its lines and margins. "Your soul will be pledged to my service. My benefits rendered on demand." The usual poetry, as you may expect. But let's be explicit with some of the clear clauses. "My precious Duke." She cleared her throat, unnecessary, ostentatious, and spoke, each clause falling from her tongue like a seal pressed in wax. Clause F, Section 9. Soulbinder shall bestow reward or favor only upon soul-bearer's fulfillment of related obligation. Clause G, Section 9. Targets shall be limited to the infernal, the demonic, the heartless, and the soulless. Clause Z, Section 13. Should the promised soul refuse abeyance or neglect duty, the pact holder shall cast the promised in Avernus as a lemure. Clause Z, Section 13. If the soulbinder consents to separation, she will release the soulbearer from all obligation within 6 months. Clause A, Section 2. Should soulholder choose to abandon his patron, he is freed from his duty. His father, Grand Duke Ulder Ravengard, will be thus fated to die by an enemy's hand. The wind seemed to pause, as if to hear how he would answer those lines. There were other lines there too. Serpentine addenda, nested definitions, time-tangled contingencies. But Mizora's eyes remained on his as she spoke the ones she had built for him. "You would threaten him," Will said quietly. "My father." Mizora's tone was almost tender. "Pet, I would educate you. Gifts with no strings breed weaker men, and I know a man of your stature is no such stock." She lifted a finger, and the ritual below stuttered. One of the iron chains twanged as if struck. "You are far from powerless. Nevertheless, you are unarmed for this battle. Let me arm you with gifts, befit for the Queen of Dragons." He thought of the yard and the drills, of Ulder's hand closing over his shoulder and guiding his stance. He thought of the city's walls and the gulls and the bells in the fog. He thought of the 5 shadows below and the thing behind them waiting to step into his home, wearing 5 faces at once. A champion acts, or he is only a boy in armor. "Read me the line that frees me," he said. Her hand hovered above the scroll, savoring the line the way a cat savors a caught bird. "Clause Z, Section 13, she repeated, voice so sweet, it would have almost burned. "If the soulbinder consents to separation, she will release the soulbearer from all obligation within 6 months. Do well, serve shrewdly, and you may yet persuade me to pet to that consent. Unlike what you may think, I am hardly heartless, Will." Will reached out. The parchment was warm, pulsing faintly in time with the throbbing power of the ritual. He pricked his finger on the edge. A bead of blood welled and fell, and where it struck, the sigils brightened. Mizora's hand closed over his, cool as ice. Flames rose around their wrists like an infinite agreement, and despite their heat, they failed to burn. The pact took. He felt it, an iron taste on his tongue, a second heartbeat low in his ribs, a lane of sight he had never had before. And Mizora watched, smiling that many-faceted smile, playing a longer, sharper game than the boy could yet see. Baldur's Gate remained unclaimed by the Dragon Queen because Zariel had wished it so. but Will Ravengard. He was hers because he had wished to save it, and Mizora knew better than anyone how to make a wish come true. By the blessings of the 9 lords of the pit, and by the 7 names of the celestial Hebdomad, I invoke thee. Concede to my demands and serve me. In return for this service, I offer my eternal soul. Malethrix, Diabolist. It is difficult to imagine why anyone would deal with devils when their motives are so clear. Regardless of their slippery words and cunning phrases, a devil has no camaraderie in mind when it approaches a mortal. It offers no love and no respect, just a simple agenda of damnation. To achieve its goals, however, a devil often appears servile and meek. It smiles and capers, bows and scrapes, and does whatever it can to make the mortal believe they are in charge. But when the mortal lets down his guard, the devil sinks in its talons and wrenches loose his soul. Devils take special delight in corrupting the souls of their enemies, and Faustian pacts have proven to be among the most effective ways to lure mortals astray. Such a contract, negotiated between a devil and a mortal, exchanges the mortal's soul for any number of possible benefits. Over the centuries, many adventurers have proven themselves susceptible to the temptations inherent in Faustian pacts, because those pacts promise the sort of powers and abilities that mortals covet. The bulk of such contracts are negotiated by harvester devils, who specialize in convincing foolish mortals to sign away their souls. Other devils of higher rank, from Erinyes to pit fiends, can also offer Faustian pacts if they wish, but they are not as aggressive in seeking new marks as harvesters. In accordance with folklore, each contract is a physical object, either a scroll or a small volume bound in fine leather and edged in gold. In it are scribed the terms of the contract in amazing detail. The devil always retains a copy of the contract and, if pressed, provides a second one to the signatory. Mortals must sign in their own blood to render the contract binding. The Pact Certain is the favoured choice of all devils who deal in Faustian pacts, but it is offered only to easy marks who have already proven themselves indifferent to the fates of their souls. A Pact Certain contains language in which the mortal explicitly affirms allegiance to a Lord of Hell and promises to walk the paths of law and evil in exchange for whatever benefits are offered. Mortals signing such pacts immediately switch their preference to lawful evil, even if they have not previously taken any actions of either a lawful or an evil nature. The mere act of consciously assigning one's soul to a Lord of Hell is, by the terms of the Pact Primeval, an irredeemably and intrinsically lawful evil act. A Pact Certain can be nullified only by proving that the bloody signature was extracted involuntarily through duress. According to the Pact Primeval, devils cannot reap signatures through torture or threats of force, including force against third parties. This rule does not, however, pertain to individuals who voluntarily sign a Pact Certain to ransom an imprisoned soul from Bator. In a Pact Insidious, a devil promises to provide certain benefits for a mortal signatory in exchange for specified reciprocal favours. It does not explicitly bind the mortal soul to Bator, nor does it require a statement of allegiance to any particular archdevil. From the devil's point of view, such a pact is still an exercise in damnation. It is merely sneakier than a Pact Certain. A Pact Insidious allows a gullible mortal to believe he can gain the benefits of a flirtation with evil without suffering its consequences. Thus, it exploits the eternal self-delusion of the lazy and greedy. A contract of this type is written to deliver its promises in stages. To reap the next stage of benefits, the signatory must perform a new service for the devil. A fool who signs such a bargain rarely notices, until it is too late, that each service incrementally nudges him toward eternal damnation. Each task specified by a pact insidious is a corrupt act. Hidden provisions in the contract revoke the previous benefits if the mortal stops performing the specified tasks. Strict prohibitions forbid the mortal from disclosing the contents of the agreement to any third party. Though the contract does not explicitly say so, these prohibitions are meant to keep mortals away from meddlesome priests, who can perform atonement spells to absolve repentant signatories of the sins they have accumulated while fulfilling the terms of the contract. Devils carefully calibrate the rewards of a Faustian pact against the value of the soul acquired. Thus, they're likely to offer more to a mighty king or a vaunted hero than to a snot-nosed street urchin. By the same token, persons already teetering on damnation's edge tend to get poorer offers than those otherwise unlikely to damn themselves. Every reward has a cost, which soul harvesters endeavor to keep as low as possible. When they can, they offer benefits achievable through the mundane resources at their disposal. For example, they might provide information from their spy networks or treasure from their raiding parties. A devil could make a signatory a prosperous tycoon by introducing him to weak-willed cultists who can steer him toward insider opportunity. Devils allow very few souls to return to the material plane and live again. The only souls they release are those of committed and useful servitors whose eventual damnation is guaranteed, or those pried from their grasp through legal proceedings. Mortals who consider themselves unfairly condemned to Bator might protest the terms of their contracts only after death, when their souls arrive on the shelves of despond. At that point, they must be knowledgeable enough to demand adjudication from the Barbazoo, attempting to manhandle them into the waiting vessels of their respective archdevils. Once this right is invoked, the Pact Primeval requires that the soul be granted a fair hearing. In ordinary circumstances, the trial takes place in the diabolical courts, which are located in the city of Abraimoch in Phlegethos. The soul is entitled to representation by the advocate of its choice. If the desired advocate is not already in Bator, the presiding devil must contact the individual to make the request, though it is under no obligation to provide transport to Bator. A harvester devil, or Erinyes, is appointed the soul's counsel if it lacks available representation. On the other side is a devil's advocate, who speaks for the condemnation of the soul. Only the following two defenses against condemnation are considered valid. The mortal was coerced or magically compelled into signing a Faustian pact. The devil offering a pact certain did not provide the promised benefits. The judge, usually a pit fiend, listens dispassionately to both sides and rules, as a lawful creature must, according to the law. Let all who enter this home, without the consent of its owner, burn for 99 years in the depths of Nessus, and freeze for 1,000 more in the icy wastes of Cania. And remember, the only morality is what is good for you.